Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite Dark Sorcerer here, Angelus, son of Abaddon. And today I'm going to wrap up the 3 video series that I started last week on Saturday. And then the last couple of days, or the last day or so, I've done Nikia, Negromancy, and today we're going to talk Necromancy, the modern day view of this practice. Okay? So why don't we begin? All right. First of all, 500 years ago, necromancy became associated with vampirism, specifically blood sorcery. Okay? The thought form was because of the practice of working with the essence of Da'ath, which is death energy, death current, basically, because you're dealing with death itself, that it is a form of decay. The thought is that basically the necromancers lived in constant pain and suffering. Now, adding blood to your rituals, it was said that it was not a cure, but that blood sorcery and vampirism could stave off that current. It's kind of different from herbalism, really, because herbalism and alchemy itself, like I talked about within the videos Nikia and Negromancy, which dealt with a lot of alchemical breakdowns and working with herbs and plants and poisons, spiritualism in general. This is dealing more with death, okay? The death current, specifically within the spiritual realm. A lot of systems today look at it as something that they shy away from because it's considered devil worship, it's considered evil, it's considered in a negative perception. The church classifies necromancy as the second marker that identifies and makes up what witchcraft is in general. Now, in their views, you have witchcraft, necromancy, divination, and possession. Okay? Now, what's ironic about this is that, like I said in the last 2 videos, it starts out with closely related to shamanism, living within a priesthood, so to speak, like the Druids, dealing with herbs and plants, going into the art of black magic, spiritualism, demonology, angelology, even, and being dubbed the first of the 7 forbidden practices. So now we're seeing where it's associated with occultism. Now, what does occultism mean? It means hidden. It means to seek out, to walk, go forth into that knowledge. The witch's pyramid, the 5th thing is to go, meaning to go forth, right? To keep secret your practice, your research. So therefore, necromancy is just that. It was something that was considered devious. It was something that was considered evil because it went against the church's perspectives, their agenda. And it actually worked, which is why they condemned it as the first of the 7 forbidden arts back in the 2nd century. It later became associated with devils and demons. Okay? But here's the kicker. Around the 15th century, technically it was around the 11th to the 13th century, we see the Munich manuscripts. The scrying mirror of Lilith was brought into play to make it easier for the sorcerer or sorceress to conjure spirits, to bring them forth, and to even go forth into the spiritual nexus, into that void, and actually associate with them. Now, a lot of times it was said that it was painful to do that because they hated the fact that you were part of the living. They were part of the dead, and you did not coincide with them. All right. So the Munich manuscripts became literally about illusions, the experimentations, especially around the 15th century version of it by Richard Keffer. Okay. Richard Keffer put forth a series of rituals and rites that were performed within a form of experimentation, from creating a banquet to creating a castle to an army out of nowhere. Okay, think of Sun Tzu, The Art of War. If you think about that for just a moment, when we think of this, we see where it goes from science, it goes from spiritualism into scientific. But when we get into the Bouchard, we get into pact making, we get into making deals and working with the spirits. Black magic in general deals with bones, human and animal alike, not just blood sorcery. Working with beings like Mephistopheles, the pact maker, Lucifer's Raphael from the Grand Grim War. But let's go even further, shall we? Let's go a little bit further. When we get into the doctrines of high witchcraft by Eliphas Levi, we see where he went to England, specifically London. Richard Cavendish and Francis Barrett speak on this quite heavily. And I'll get into this in just a few minutes. Now, the story goes that Eliphas Levi wanted to join this secret society of magicians and sorcerers. So he went to London and had to be put through numerous tests and trials. Now, those of you who are practitioners know exactly what I'm talking about, how the spirits literally test you. They try you. They make sure that you are prepared for what they have to offer. So one day he gets summoned. So he gets into the carriage, and there's this lone woman dressed head to toe in black, and I'm talking the black veil, the whole king caboodle. And she gives him this ritual to do. She says, you have 3 days to do it, to complete it, and to prove that you have it. Okay? She gives him all the ingredients. So he goes forth and he spends 3 days doing this right. And finally, he conjures a spirit. He summons a spirit through the circle of empowerment and the triangle of evocation. Now, it's said that the spirit manifests originally in front of him. Okay? In front of him. And then it disappears and reappears right next to him. Technically, just slightly over his shoulder. And just touches his arm. Now, the story goes that his arm became numb and went limp and was painful for days after. Now, this act of necromancy scared him so badly that he went back to his native land, and delved back into Hermetics and the Kabbalah, never to practice the dark arts again. Francis Barrett, in his book, The Magus, Volume 1, breaks down necromancy into 2 classifications. The first classification is conjuration. Now, this is where we see the spiritual summonings from the Grand Grimoire, the Grand Grimoire Red Dragon, which actually has more detail on that path with and summoning of Lucifer's Raphael. Okay, we see it more within the Bouchard. Okay, the summoning of and making a pact with Mephistopheles. Just about every grimoire system, summoning deals with bones, ground bones and dust and blood and all this stuff to summon a spirit. Doesn't matter if it's the jinn or the ugan, the loa, the demons, the angelics. It didn't matter. Or even just a reincarnated spirit. They didn't classify it. They just dubbed it all into one. Basically, this is what conjuration is. When a lot of practitioners in Satanism today, when they deal with invocations and they're calling on demons, they always start out with, say, for an example, the invocation to Satan out of Anton Zandalavay's The Satanic Bible, where it says, I call, conjure, and summon thee, Satan, Lord of the earth. Okay? The king of demons, the lord of all demonic. Now, this view is found in the poetical, can't speak tonight, the poetical texts, okay? Now, when we get into the demonic Bible by Turk-Suzij, we also see where it says, I invoke thee, I summon thee, I conjure thee, okay? Now, what did I say in my last video? I conjure, I adjure, and I exercise thee. Interesting how that stays within the JCI confines of Jewish, Hebrew, Islamic traditions. Interesting, isn't it? But yet, the texts themselves, when we get into these types of spiritualists, we see where conjuration manifests a spirit right in front of you. Okay? Look at the Witch of Endor, for an example. The Witch of Endor, compared to that of, say, Jesus Christi, Jesus Christ on Mount Hinnom with two of his disciples. Okay, Jacob's Ladder, prime example. Okay, these are two different arts. The first, we see Jacob's Ladder, or that of the ripping of the veil. The conjuration would be bringing forth two spirits from beyond. The bringing back of Lazarus from the pit, from death. The centurion's daughter, even. She is not dead, but only slumbers. Okay? This here, you're literally raising the dead through a form of rejuvenation, okay? Which was the second classification that Francis Barrett put out there. Now, before I get into that, I want to stay with the conjuration for just a second. Now, the conjuration was to open up the rift and bring forth the spirits as proof to his disciples. David and his friends within the book of Daniel's. His friends were thrown into a furnace. Two went in. What was it? It was either two or three went into the furnace, but when they opened up the door, they found an extra figure. It was an angelic being. Okay? When Daniel was thrown into the pit with the hungry lions, they did not touch him, but they touched everybody else. Why? Because there was a spirit there guarding him, protecting him. Okay? Spiritual protection. Okay? And this goes well with working with demons, specifically that of unholy guardian demons. Okay? Now, when we think conjuration, you're bringing a spirit forward to perform some form of question or to get some form of information from the divine wisdom of the beyond. Think of most of the goetic demons that are mentioned in the Lesser Key of Solomon literally speak of past, present, future divining. And that's normally done through one question, okay, where you can gain your answer from. Rejuvenation of a corpse, on the other hand, is something completely different. The Witch of Endor, Lazarus, and even the Santorin's daughter, this was a form of rejuvenation, okay, where the spirit was guided back to the body or to a body that was prepared specifically for that purpose, okay, for that show. King Saul sent out his men to find the top seer. This is in the book of Kings, okay? Now, it turned out it was the Witch of Endor, which a lot of practitioners today seem to quote. And like I said, this is also in the Old Testament too, so it only makes sense from a Hebraic perspective, the JCI perspective. So he went to her, and at the time there was these witchcraft laws. Basically, mean if you were found out, you'd be put to death. So she said, "Why are you trying to ensnare me?" Basically called him out on his bullshit, but then proceeded to do as he wished and rejuvenate a corpse with blood sorcery to gain the insight and the answers to his questions. This deals with the 40-year war. How does it end? When is it going to end? How do I end it? What's my role in this? I am weary. How is it going to come to an end? Okay? That was his mood. That was his thought. And it turned out he died on the battlefield. Ironically, in a valley on a mountain, along with his sons. And then David took over. Okay? Now, also, rejuvenation in dealing with spirits also goes into the confines of the 72 demons of the Goetia, okay? They were trapped in a magical ring, which also goes back into alchemy in the Philosopher's Stone, all right? Now, what's ironic here is that now that you have a clear definition of the difference between the rejuvenation and the conjuration of spirits, why don't we get into the medical? Okay, the medical community has been performing necromancy and necromantic acts for over 3 centuries. Shocker, right? Shouldn't be. They've been doing it behind closed doors, just like practitioners. But ironically, there's actually texts, there's actually proof that they've been doing it. Freezing water has been known to rejuvenate, but also to cleanse the mind. Psychiatric hospitals use freezing water, ice water, because they believed it was a way to bring the mind back into reality. Think of schizophrenia compared to a normal person. All right. As the ages grew, it went into electrocution. It went into drugs such as adrenaline, which was injected directly into the heart. By the 1950s, we had electrocution. Even the late 18th century, early 19th century, we had electrocution. We created the gas chamber, which was a form of alchemy and herbalism. The electric chair to kill. Today, we actually have electrocution to restart somebody's heart. Ironic, isn't it? How all of these practices of ancient days is now in the hands of the medical professionals that you see on a day-to-day basis. When paramedics show up, defibrillators, if your heart is not breathing, to bring you back into a stable rhythm. Adrenaline to get that kickstart. Ironic, I think. And what's funny is that there's even more evidence of herbalism, shamanism, necromancy techniques within the medical community. A lot of people just don't see it because they don't want to see it. Because we live in a time where knowledge, even though at our fingertips, nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to know nothing about it. Very, very fascinating. But what's also interesting here is that more modern views of necromancy can be seen from a corrupted perspective. Look at Hollywood produced films. You have the villain that Liu Kang fought within the Mortal Kombat. You have witches and warlocks, from Witches of East End to Charmed. Okay? You go into video games. You have Quan Chi. You have various different video games that deals with raising of the dead. Even the Necromancy speaks of it. Ironic, isn't it? Just how far necromancy has been carried into, from its purest states to the most corrupted and watered down formulations. Today, like I said, witchcraft, necromancy, divination, and possession are how sorcery is literally combined and identified today. Possession can be broken down into 5 stages. Every system seems to have some form of entity that's associated with the dead. Baron Samedi, Baroness Dambella in Vudan, Santa Muerte or La Santa Muerte within Central American to Spanish, Portugal systems. You have Supe in Inca, Anubis in Egyptian, Hel or Helios in Norse, Chernobog in Slavic, Satan in Hebrew, Iblis or El Shaitan in Islamic, Jewish systems. And now, even Lucifer is considered the Lord of the damned, the Lord of the dead. Ironic, isn't it? Even images from Set or Seth to Hades to Loki are considered to be the horned gods of the devil. Beings that you call upon within your spirituality, through your rituals and services. I mean, look at the image of Satan, for an example, and how the world views him. A half man, half goat? Huh. That screams Pan from the Greek. Lord of fidelity. Ruler of the nymphos, who frolic and maintain nature. The trident, Poseidon, Lord of storms and chaos, Set or Seth in Egyptian. To the Lord of chaos and mischief, Loki in Norse. The black god, Ahriman in Zoroastrianism, which predates Christianity altogether. Chernobog, the black god in Slavic. Every system of sorcery seems to have a devil or demons within their system, spirits that sorcerers tend to go for. Those are the practitioners of necromancy, are viewed as evil, associated with those that deal with the dead and avoided like the plague. But then you got to take a look at how people, practitioners in general today, would rather go with the term necromancy, even though in Greek and Russian it means glick or lik, meaning corpse, means dead body. It means death, vigor mortis. Greek, meaning corpse. Mancy, meaning the practice thereof. And yet, this is supposedly more pure and more tolerated than that of nigromancy, the art of black magic. The very definition of what this practice resembles. Because you're dealing with magic. You're dealing with conjurations and spiritual summonings. You're dealing with herbalism, alchemy, and religious services, not just public services from a clergic perspective. But now it's all legalized through the medical definition. You have to have a license to practice it. Bullshit. That's what I say. I mean, I'm an ordained minister, and I practice necromancy. I practice Satanism, demonolatry. I even practice voodoo, Santa Morte even, Palo Mayumbi. But you know what? Every one of these systems has lords of the dead. Saint Death herself is a very needy goddess, demanding your time and energy. Ironic, it's similar to that of Jehovah, the jealous God of the Hebraic systems. But yet you shouldn't be calling angelics while you're summoning demons. Cancels each other out. And yet, nigromancy, meaning the art of black magic, is so impure that they would rather go with working with corpses and death, dead bodies, cadavers, and such. Interesting. And just think, what I've just said in this video, in the last 3 videos, is just a small tidbit of what's really out there for knowledge from every perspective you can think on. And I'm not joking. It's just a small little tidbit of each one of these. I mean, think about it, even Hecate is the goddess of witchcraft, necromancy, ghosts, the underworld, and most importantly, justice. Think about that. I want to thank Brent and Seeking Serpent for taking time to join me in this video. I concur with you, Brent. I really do. There's so much watered down corruption today. It's really unpure. You want pure necromancy, you got to go all the way back into nigromancy and Nicaea. See how they practiced. Go into Egyptian mythology, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, also known as the Art of Dying, the Art to Bow, and such. And I do apologize. My familiar is trying to come in here. She's a very impatient little girl. That's all I got to say. But like I said, I hope this has been enlightening. I hope it's been educational. And I hope that you go out and you look into the materials and the sources, not just the names that I've given, and learn for yourselves. Welcome to the channel, Marco. All right. Yeah, she really needs to have me in her sight, otherwise she goes stir crazy. I'm surprised, literally, that she's not throwing herself against the door or howling for all she's worth. So, but anyways, I hope this series has been intellectual. I hope it's been enlightening. And like I said, hope that you go out and look into this for yourselves. All right? Have a good night. And until next time, enjoy.